Good morning. I was really impressed, I must say, at the fact that at exactly 3 minutes after 9:30, a respectful silence fell over the hall, even before anyone had stood up. So I'm assuming that respectful silence will last for another couple of minutes. I'm not going to speak to you from a position of legal or sociological expertise. You have some of the best minds in Ireland, people like Geoffrey Shannon, Sheila Green, here this morning to speak to you. I'm going to speak to you, I suppose, on the basis of 5 years learned and lived experience of the lives children lead in general. And also perhaps it mightn't be impertinent, or too impertinent anyway, to say a word of encouragement about the struggle for greater equality that you're engaged in. Because every struggle for greater equality comes to an end eventually. It has its ups and its downs. It's 2 steps forward and it's 1 step back. But this is a struggle that has to succeed. There's no possibility of failure at the end of the day where this issue is concerned. As Grania said, I've over many years been involved in campaigns for the rights of people with disabilities, the rights of children, the rights of travellers in terms of some of the work we do. And the one thing I've learned is that you just can't ever give up. Every time you think you see a light at the end of the tunnel, you have to wait and see whether it's welcome daylight or whether it's the oncoming headlights of another recalcitrant government minister who's afraid to make the final decision, but who nevertheless revels in the headlights. I suppose one of the things, when I was asked to speak this morning, one of the things I reflected on was my own failure to keep a date. I've been asked, I was written to, I think their mother actually put them up to it, I was written to by 2 young boys who live down the country back at the end of May, and I'm dying to go and meet them, and I just haven't managed to get there. But I thought I would start by reading the letter that they sent me. And I don't know if there are media people here, but I would be grateful if the media people wouldn't use any of the names. But anyway, the letter simply says, "Dear Fergus, my name is and I'm 12 years old. I'm writing to you about how I feel about having lesbian parents, which I don't think about very often because they're mostly my mums. I really like having lesbian parents, and so does my brother, who's 7.5. I get along great with my friends in school and have no trouble whatsoever academically. My dad lives just down the road, under a kilometre away, and he's gay. I'll be going into secondary school next September, which I'm looking forward to a lot. Currently, I play the piano and also play rugby for my local club. I think many laws should be passed to do with lesbian and gay people. For example, I think there should be a law passed that would recognise as my mum, even though she isn't my birth mother. She cooks, usually very well. She works hard, and she calls me in the mornings, the same as my other mother. I would like us as a family to be recognised by the law so that we have the same rights as everyone else. Maybe you could help us to get the government to change the laws. If you'd ever like to meet us to talk more about this, let me know." And it's signed. I do hope to meet them, and I do hope to get there. And I'm ashamed to say that I haven't managed to do it yet. But the letter actually says, in its own way, what the report says. It's the voice of ordinary children who don't feel they have suffered discrimination yet, but will. In the work we do in Barnardos, we work with about 5,000 children every year all around Ireland. In that work, we have 2 objectives, and we try to reach those objectives. Sometimes it takes a lot longer than other times, in respect of every child we work with. And those 2 objectives are to try to achieve a significant increase in their capacity to get the most from their education, and to try to achieve a significant increase in their emotional well-being. Now, emotional well-being in our terms means happiness, but it means a lot more than happiness. It means the skills to make friends, it means the skills to socialise, it means the skills to deal with the adversity that life throws up. All of the kids we work with have lives that have been affected in one way or another by poverty, by exclusion, by economic disadvantage. And we, I guess, operate on the basis that the only way to overcome that disadvantage is by giving those children the best possible start that they can be given. But two things I think I've learned from the work that we do. The first is that I have yet to meet a parent of any stripe or kind who doesn't love their children. Although I do meet parents who can't manifest that love as effectively as it ought to be manifested. I do meet parents whose own lives are so out of control in a variety of different ways that the proper manifestation of parental love is often impossible for them. The second thing I've discovered, and we've asked children this, and surveys have asked children this, and I think it's an incontrovertible fact. The second thing I've discovered is that it doesn't matter what the circumstances at home are. The most important thing in any child's life is his or her family. The most important thing for them is to be loved in a family setting. Now, the children that we work with are very often consciously and unconsciously discriminated against in a whole variety of ways. They're frequently discriminated against because of as they grow up, particularly because of the address in which they live. They're frequently discriminated against because they look and feel different in a schoolyard, maybe because parents haven't been able to afford the full school uniform, or the right array of school books, or the designer labelled school bag. Children who look and feel different are frequently bullied, and about a quarter of our children report bullying on a regular and systematic basis. But in fact, a quarter of children in Ireland generally report the experience of bullying. What I think that teaches you is, first of all children are the same. There is no difference in terms of what they want, what they need, what they're entitled to. What they're primarily entitled to is the love and affection and constancy that a strong family relationship gives them. And it doesn't matter to the child what the nature of that family is, and therefore it shouldn't matter to anybody else. The work that we do, I suppose, has put us in the forefront in some ways of campaigning for a referendum on the rights of children. And that referendum has been campaigned for now. The current signs are that it will happen in the spring of next year, although there have been so many shifts and changes in that it's impossible to be absolutely certain. And the referendum the thinking behind the referendum is based on the UN Convention on the Rights of the Child. A lot of the work that was done in the Oireachtas and that was done on the basis of legal advice is done on the basis of the UN Convention. And Jeffrey, I know, who's probably Ireland's leading authority on the Convention and on the legal rights of children, will say more about that. But I think it's worth remembering just what a couple of the articles of the UN Convention say. The Convention in Article 2 applies to every child, whatever their race, religion or abilities, whatever they think or say, whatever type of family they come from. It doesn't matter where children live, what language they speak, what their parents do, whether they're boys or girls, whether they're gay or straight, what their culture is, whether they have a disability, whether they're rich or poor. No child should be treated unfairly on any basis. That's what the UN Convention says. Article 3 of the Convention says that the best interests of children must be the primary concern in making decisions that may affect them. All adults should do what is best for children. When adults make decisions, they should think about how their decisions will affect children. and this particularly applies to budget makers, policy makers, and lawmakers. And Article 4 says very clearly, very simply, governments have a responsibility to take all available measures to make sure children's rights are respected, protected, and fulfilled. When countries ratify the Convention, they agree to review their laws relating to children. We ratified this Convention. In fact, it was ratified by the father of the current Minister for Children, when he was Minister for Foreign Affairs, David Andrews, back in 1993. But we haven't even really seriously begun to review the convention, the laws as they relate to children. Last year, Ireland saw the publication of the Ryan Report. The Ryan Report documented decades of abuse of children whose voices were never heard, and it was the only thing that all those children had in common. They came from an extraordinary variety of backgrounds and circumstances, but the one thing they all had in common was that their voices were never heard. They were never represented in a court, though some of them were effectively sentenced to life imprisonment. They were never represented in a court, and they were never listened to. So now I think we've begun to listen to children as a country. The Taoiseach, when he was speaking in the Dáil on the publication of the Ryan Report, said that there was only one response possible, and that response was to make Ireland a model of how children should be treated. You can't make Ireland a model of how children should be treated without recognising their right to love, care, and constancy with the family they know and the family they love. If you put laws in place or fail to enact laws that remove the difference between children and their families, you are continuing to discriminate against children. The Oireachtas seems, at one level, to agree with this proposition. I know they behaved in a very peculiar way, a shameful way in some ways, in relation to the Civil Partnership Bill. But when it came to the rights of children, they established a degree of unanimity, and they put forward a set of words which we hope to have a right to vote on in the spring of next year. Now, you can't be absolutely certain that this will be the finished product. I heard, rather disquietingly, some voices recently suggesting that we couldn't possibly pass a referendum that might limit in any way the right of the state to deport children from Ireland whose skin was a different colour. But assuming that that argument doesn't hold sway, and assuming that the basic provisions that have already been put forward by the Oireachtas are the provisions that will be put in front of the people, this is what the first two paragraphs will say, and this is what we will be asking people to write into the Constitution. 1.1, first line of Article 42, and Article 42 is called Children. First line of Article 42 will say, the state shall cherish all the children of the state equally. Goes on then to say, the state recognises and acknowledges the natural and imprescriptible rights of all children, including their right to have their welfare regarded as a primary consideration, and shall, as far as practicable, protect and vindicate those rights. That might actually sound like a reasonably familiar form of wording. It's the form of wording adopted by the Oireachtas, and it's the form of words that already applies in our Constitution to children who haven't been born yet. So I guess in one sense what is proposed here is to extend the rights and duties of the state towards children who haven't been born to children who are born. And 1.3 will go on to say, in the resolution of all disputes concerning the guardianship, adoption, custody, care or upbringing of a child, the welfare and best interests of the child shall be the first and paramount consideration. Goes on then to say, the state guarantees in its laws to recognise and vindicate the rights of all children as individuals, including 1, the right of the child to such protection and care as is necessary for his or her safety and welfare. 2, the right of the child to an education. 3, the right of the child's voice to be heard in any judicial and administrative proceedings affecting the child, having regard to the child's age and maturity. I hope that if there are ever any judicial or administrative proceedings concerning Padraig or his brother Tomas and their future and their well-being, that the first voices listened to in that case will be theirs, because they are clear, they're cogent, they're honest, and they're direct. We cannot afford to lose this referendum. Ireland owes a debt to the children of the past and the children of the future to ensure that never, ever again will the voices of children not be listened to. And when we're listening to the voices of children, we have to listen to the voices of the children and young people in this report. We have to listen to what their lives mean, to the latent and sometimes very explicit discrimination that they encounter, and we have to end it. As I said at the start, this campaign has to win. It will win. We cannot turn the clock back on equality. We might move forward in fits and starts. We might encounter setbacks, and God knows we've encountered a lot of them over the years. But things that were regarded as outrageous when I started out, absolutely outrageous. I mean, I can remember, and most of you can't, the first arguments about equal pay for women in Ireland, the first notion that women couldn't be discriminated against in the workplace. When we began debating, and it's not that long ago, things like anti-discrimination legislation in the workplace, that was only in the 90s. Employers put up arguments about the awful, horrendous costs of adding female toilets into male-only workplaces in order to allow women not to be discriminated against. Way back, when I was 27, and the marriage bar was removed against women. It was seen then as the end of civilization. It was seen as the beginning of an era when men would be hounded out of the workplace. We now know, apart from anything else, that the Celtic Tiger was built on the participation of women. We know that without the introduction of thousands and thousands and thousands of women on an equal basis into the workforce, or at least a more equal basis into the workforce, the Celtic Tiger simply wouldn't have happened. And it's probably arguable that if we put women in charge of running the banks, the disaster that we've had wouldn't have happened either. So what was controversial 20 years ago, 30 years ago? What was strenuously argued against? The things we sought derogations from in Europe to try and delay introducing equality are commonplace now. The same thing has happened in relation to disability, although we have a huge way to go in terms of removing legal discriminations there. But at least we have begun to put a legal framework in place. This struggle has to win, and this struggle will win. No matter how many bumps in the road there are, equality for the children of lesbian, gay, bisexual and transgender parents will happen, and so will equality for their parents. It has to happen, and it will happen. So don't give up the fight. Thank you very much.